In Antarctica, some scientists are drilling into the ice to get samples. As they drill deeper, the ice under their camp begins to crack. Soon, the drill starts sinking. Jason nearly falls into the hole, but Jack and Frank catch him just in time. Then Jack takes a risk and jumps over the crack to get the samples. When he jumps back, the ice breaks under his feet and he falls. Luckily, he uses an axe to hold on, and his friends pull him up. They watch as the whole ice shelf breaks. Later, Jack goes to a UN conference on global warming in New Delhi. He tells the world leaders that a new ice age is coming, which will freeze everything on the planet. When the politicians ask how much time is left, Jack says it might take hundreds of years. But if they don't stop using fossil fuels soon, their grandchildren will suffer. Unfortunately, the politicians say it would be very expensive and call Jack's speech exaggerated. Outside, people are protesting against climate change. A reporter talks about the snow, which has never happened in this area before and is causing chaos in the city. After the conference, Jack meets Terry, who works for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Terry agrees with Jack's ideas and they leave together to discuss their theories. A few days later, at Terry's monitoring station in Scotland, an employee notices that a buoy is showing a big temperature drop. His coworker thinks a strong wave must have caused it. When Terry comes back, they don't tell him about the temperature drop. In Japan, it seems like a normal rainy day until huge hailstones start falling from the sky, destroying vehicles and buildings and even killing some people. In the USA, reports about Hurricane Noelani have surprised weather experts. This is the strongest hurricane ever recorded, killing hundreds of people. At the International Space Station, the astronauts are shocked to see huge, unusual storms forming on Earth. Meanwhile, Jack's son Sam is flying to New York with his friend Brian and his crush Laura. Sam is afraid of flying, and he gets even more nervous when the plane enters a huge storm, causing it to shake. Suddenly, the pilot announces they will go through some turbulence. Everyone fastens their seatbelts and holds tight as the shaking gets worse and bags fall into the aisle. Thankfully, it doesn't last long. Sam then realizes he's holding Laura's hand and quickly lets go. When they arrive in New York, they are surprised to see a large group of birds flying west, almost like they are escaping from something. Animals in farms and zoos are also acting strangely, as if they are scared. Sam and his friends go to the competition and do quite well, but Sam notices that a boy from another school named JD keeps flirting with Laura. Later at the monitoring station, Terry finally sees the buoy showing the drop in ocean temperature. The employee tells him what he saw the other day. They soon discover that multiple buoys are sending the same report, so it's not a malfunction. Terry decides to call Jack to tell him that his theory is happening very quickly, something that hasn't happened since the last ice age 10,000 years ago. The only forecast model that can predict this scenario is Jack's. While newscasts report that Hurricane Noelani is getting worse and the Coast Guard has closed the beaches, a technician at a weather monitoring center in California is busy with his girlfriend instead of working. She suddenly hears a noise and gets scared, but it turns out to be the janitor. Back with Jack, he and his co-workers watch the news reports from helicopters. They're filming how several tornadoes are forming rapidly around LA, destroying everything in their path. People panic and try to escape, but even big vehicles are blown away. Soon buildings start to collapse too. The weather monitoring center is also hit, barely standing on the ruins afterward. Soon the president orders all air traffic to stop, but 2 planes don't make it back in time and crash in the Midwest. An emergency meeting is held at the Office of Global Change in Washington, D.C. They share reports of weird and violent weather from all over the world. Thanks to Terry's confirmation, Jack can explain that this is happening because of the North Atlantic currents. They're affected by the polar ice melting because of global warming. He also says that this is just the beginning and it will get worse soon. But a climate shift is still just a theory, so Jack's boss gives him 48 hours to find proof to show to the government. With the help of Frank, Jason, and NASA's meteorologist Janet, Jack starts working hard on writing a good report. They find out there are only 6 to 8 weeks before a new ice age hits the Earth. The next day, Jack gets a call from Sam. Sam says he's stuck in New York because the non-stop rain is flooding the city and many places are closed. After he hangs up, Jack discovers that JD is offering his group to stay in his fancy apartment. While the bad weather hasn't reached DC yet, people are already panicking and raiding the supermarkets. Jack meets with the vice president and tells him the situation is critical, so they should start evacuating, but the vice president ignores him. Meanwhile, in Northern Europe, it has been snowing heavily for the last 24 hours with no sign of stopping. A search and rescue team is sent to bring back the royal family, but the helicopters have no visibility due to the storm. They end up flying into the calm center of the storm. Soon, the helicopter's instruments and blades freeze, causing it to crash. Only one pilot survives, but when he looks outside, He freezes to death. Terry hears about the incident and sends confidential data to Jack because Jack has a more powerful computer to analyze it. They discover a hurricane forming over land, which isn't normal. In New York, it has been raining for 3 days already. All trains have been stopped, and water is now pouring out of street manholes. In Canada, the ocean suddenly rose by 25 feet, causing terrible storms. There are even reports of a tropical hurricane. Sam and his friends see these reports on TV just before the power goes out. JD announces he wants to go pick up his brother and offers to give the group a ride too. When they leave the building, they see that the city is in total chaos and the flood is getting worse. To make things even scarier, workers at the local zoo find out that the wolves have gotten out. Lots of people are hurrying to find safety in the National Library. But sadly, a homeless man isn't allowed inside because he has his dog with him. The water rises so much that cars can't move, and many people are stuck inside them. Sam's group runs towards the library, but Laura stays to help a family in a car and hurts her leg. Suddenly, a huge tsunami appears. It hits the Statue of Liberty and then covers the city, causing thousands of people to die. There's nothing they can do to stop it. They can only try to save lives. Jack gets an alert about what's happening in New York and hurries to meet with his wife Lucy. In New York, all the survivors, including the dog, are trying to get comfortable in the library. Nobody has service on their phones, so Sam searches for a payphone. He goes down to a flooded floor to find it and quickly calls his parents to let them know he's okay. Jack tells him what's really happening and asks him to stay indoors because the storm will get worse and anyone outside will freeze to death. The water on that floor rises quickly, reaching the ceiling and cutting off the call. Laura briefly worries that Sam has drowned, but luckily he swims out. Then Laura looks for dry clothes for Sam and hugs him to share her body heat. Moments later, everyone hears a strange noise. When they look outside, they're shocked to see a cargo ship sailing through the flooded streets, crushing vehicles beneath it. Meanwhile, Jack decides he'll go to New York to save his son despite the danger. His boss knows he can't stop him, but first he asks him to try contacting the government again because they have a meeting with the president this time. During the meeting, Jack gives an impressive presentation. He suggests that people in the north should go as far south as possible, maybe even to Mexico. The vice president once again disagrees with everything Jack says, but this time he's told off by the president's team for not paying attention to this earlier. To simplify the plan, Jack draws a line on the USA map showing where people can still be evacuated. He explains that, sadly, it's too late for those who are far away because anyone entering that area will freeze. After Jack leaves, the vice president tries to protest against evacuation again, but the president ignores him and approves Jack's plan. Back at Terry Station, the building loses power, and the team decides to drink because they don't think they'll be rescued. In New York, the library also loses power. The homeless man sees that the flood has frozen, and people are walking on the ice to go south. So, the survivors in the library start getting ready to do the same. Sam tries to stop them by telling them what Jack said, but most people ignore him and leave anyway. Only a small group stays behind. Because the temperature is dropping so fast, they have to start burning books to stay warm. They also break the vending machines to get food and use the carpets as blankets. Outside the city, people are suffering from the cold and regret leaving the library. Some of them are starting to die. Meanwhile, Mexico closes its borders because it can't handle any more American refugees. All the roads are jammed with traffic, so people start crossing the river to reach Mexico as illegal immigrants. A few hours later, the traffic finally starts moving because the American president has made a deal. He'll forgive all Latin American debts in exchange for opening the borders. In a hospital in D.C., Lucy is reading to one of her patients when she gets some bad news. People panicked and fled, so there are no ambulances left. A coworker says there's a policeman with a snowplow that can help, but the patient can only be moved in an ambulance. Lucy tells her coworker to leave while she stays with the child to wait for proper help. Back to Jack. He's surprised to get help from Frank and Jason to go rescue Sam. Using the science equipment designed for Antarctica, they drive across the frozen lands in their truck. But eventually, the vehicle hits a roadblock. Now they have no choice but to continue on foot using snowshoes and staying connected with a rope. They walk for a few hours, but they can't see what they're stepping on because of the snow. At one point, they accidentally walk on top of a building. The glass breaks and Frank falls in, pulling the others down with him. Jack manages to stop the fall with his axe again, but the glass under him starts to crack too. First, Frank cuts the end of the rope to release their main supplies bag, but it's not enough. So, Frank cuts his rope as well. His friends shout for him as Frank falls to his death. Afterward, Jack and Jason put up a tent to spend the night. In the hospital, an ambulance finally arrives to pick up Lucy and the patient. At the White House, the president is also evacuated, but moments later, the vice president receives news that the president got caught in the storm and didn't make it. In the International Space Station, the astronauts see a massive cloud covering the planet. They take some images to send to Janet. As soon as she sees them, she predicts that the Canadian storm will hit New York in an hour. At the library, Laura can't sleep, so Sam talks to her. He finally admits his feelings, and Laura responds by kissing him. In the morning, the group discovers that Laura has passed out because of a fever. They look up the symptoms in a medicine book and check her leg. They realize that the cut from the other day has given her blood poisoning. The book says she needs penicillin immediately, or she'll lose her leg. So Sam decides to go into the cargo ship to search for medicine, and Brian and JD volunteer to help. The trio quickly reaches the ship, unaware that their scent is being picked up by the wolves that escaped from the zoo. The infirmary door is locked, so Sam climbs out of a corridor window and carefully makes his way around the wall. He breaks into the infirmary through a window and lets his friends in. Brian finds the penicillin. Sam wants to go back right away, but Brian and JD say they should also get food. While they're in the kitchen, the trio is suddenly found by the wolves, who start chasing them through the ship. A wolf bites Jason's leg, so Sam hits it on the head until it lets go of his friend, and they close the door behind them. At that moment, the eye of the storm finally covers New York. Sam notices this and makes a plan. He'll lure the wolves out of the room so his friends can lock the door. Then Sam crosses the wall outside to re-enter through the window, but he accidentally steps on broken glass and gets the wolves' attention sooner than planned. He quickly starts running, and after a few turns, he manages to lure them into a corridor and lock the door. The wolves go to the other end of the corridor to try to reach the kitchen, but Brian and JD have already locked that door too. Now they're collecting supplies. They put all the stuff and a wounded JD on a boat and drag it out of the ship just as the buildings around them start freezing and falling. Brian and Sam have to pick JD up and run into the library. They enter the warm room just before the rest of the building freezes. The group immediately works on making the fire stronger. On the frozen landscape, Jack and Jason keep moving, but eventually, Jason collapses from exhaustion, and Jack has to drag him through the snow. When he discovers the eye of the storm, he starts digging in the snow and finds an open vent. He throws Jason and himself through it just before this area freezes too. A few hours later, Jason wakes up to find the tent set up and a few fires burning. As soon as Jack sees him, he wants to keep going. He doesn't hear Jason's idea to wait because Jack thinks Sam may not survive for long. As Jack and Jason walk through the storm, they keep encountering frozen bodies everywhere. They only stop to sleep in the tent at night. Jack says that humanity survived an ice age before, but they need to be more careful now, or they might not survive this one. Sometime later, the International Space Station sees that the storm is calming down in Europe. They can see land again. At the same time, Jack leaves the tent and sees that the sky is clear. It's easier for him and Jason to walk now. They soon reach New York. They see the Statue of Liberty completely frozen and a lot of ships stuck in the ice. When the GPS shows they're on top of the library, Jack feels devastated. He realizes his son might be buried in the snow, but he doesn't give up. The two of them find a hole in the snow and enter the building through a window. As they search, they start to feel hopeless, but eventually they see light under a door. They open it and find the group alive and well. Even Laura is feeling better. Sam and Jack quickly hug each other warmly. Sometime later in Mexico, the vice president becomes the new president. After hearing about the survivors in the library, he announces on TV that he was wrong. He says he will start a big rescue operation to save people stuck in the northern states. Soon, helicopters arrive in New York and take the group away, including the dog. They also find many survivors in other buildings. In the International Space Station, the astronauts look at the Earth. They notice that the air is the clearest they've ever seen.